Guys, so we've got this. Look, whoa, we've got this concept of tawatur. We need to talk about this. What is tawatur? Now, tawatur is to do with hadith. Right, so, right, Claire Jones, Ibrahim, shukran for your kind and encouraging words. Right, so, oh, and a big shout out to the egg boy. I almost forgot, people, the egg boy. All right, live on, man. Oh, much respect to him. I can't believe that politician, whatever, is allowed to be who he is in New Zealand, and he ought to be arrested seriously for hate crimes. And I think that young boy who egged him deserves an international award, honestly. Tribute coming out to you from Monday Nights with Mufti. If nobody else, at least we give him a tribute. Gio Merijan, Gio. Right, so right now, coming to this tawatur, we need to discuss tawatur, people, because a lot of people use this. They say certain hadith are mutawatir. Tawatur means something that has been transmitted en masse, that it's so transmitted that it's impossible. The definition they use is yastahil. It's impossible or inconceivable that everybody were co-conspirators in bringing about this lie. So, you know, it's like, duh. It's like one of those things like, duh. That's tawatur, okay. So when a thing is of this value, it is mutawatir. So people give the example often like, how do you know a country exists? So you could say, well, I suppose more so today you could say, well, I've seen through social media, I've done this, and so many people, like they say, how do you know China exists? Say, well, obviously through all these things. Today, I suppose through technology we can actually zoom in, but in the past, how did people know China existed? Well, they just knew because everybody knew. It was common knowledge that it couldn't be a conspiracy just to delude you. So that is the definition of tawatur, and a thing that has that value is called mutawatir in Arabic. Now, these are just fanciful terms, but why was this debate important? Well, this was a theology debate, a debate to do with belief. It was nothing to do with hadith. It was to do with how you believe. How do we know what we know? So within belief, within theology, aqidah or kalam, ilm al-kalam, you have a section which is to do with how do we have knowledge? Like, how do we know anything? Like if I asked you, how do you know something? So you will say, and this in modern terms, this is called epistemology. Okay, big word. Don't worry about it, people. Don't worry about it. Okay, so epistemology is dealing with the branch of knowledge, like how you know things, how you have the acquisition of knowledge. So, as an example, somebody, right? As an example, your senses. So somebody may say, "How do you know something?" You say, "Well, I saw it." Okay, fine. I heard it. You know, senses. I felt something. Or these. What about? How else can you know something? You can sometimes deduce things. Like I can put something together and I can deduce. Oh, right, that explains. You know, I saw that. Well, this jacket was missing from here. I left it here. I saw him wearing that exact jacket. It meant he must have been here. You understand? Now, this, obviously I didn't see him here, but I can deduce that, and then you can make inductions as well. You can take loads of, so for example, yeah, I don't know, like I've boiled water, it's boiled here. Or let's just say, I don't know, like every crow I've seen, like, is black. So now I make an induction, okay, so by principle, all crows are black. Now this is a piece of knowledge that I've arrived at by, you know, looking at different informations and drawing it together and drawing a principle. So there's different ways on how you can arrive at knowledge. And the fancy term for this is epistemology. And so now during this discussion in Aqidah, they discussed something called Tawatur. They said, well, Tawatur is one way you can acquire knowledge. You can say, well, how do you know China exists? In the past, they would say, well, I know because it's common knowledge. Everybody knows it. Duh. They wouldn't have made it up just to trick me. They go, well, fine. Common knowledge will accept as a means of knowledge. You see. So this is where the discussion of Tawatur enters. Now, why was this important? This was important in the sense of how do we, using our knowledge, arrive at God? And argue, is there a God? Isn't there a God? How do we argue with evidences? Because people will say, well, I know this, well, what is knowledge anyway? And that's why you discuss epistemology. So I just wanted to clarify the backdrop to where this comes in. Then along comes Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, who's a great Hadith scholar, but, you know, allegedly he used to now and then have a little drink. I don't know if that's true, but some of the Hanafis have mentioned that he was like that. Zaid al-Kawthari says that he would like his occasional. But he was a great scholar of Hadith, legend in Hadith. However, I don't know whether the drink part is true, but and if that day he'd had a little chalo ho jaye yaar, ho jaye. Right, so he, in his writing his book on Hadith, brings in the discussion Tawatur. For no reason. It's nothing to do with Hadith. The question was, look, how do we know that the Prophet, the discussion of Hadith was, how do you, okay, the Prophet said this, but how do you know the Prophet said it? And somebody said, well, I know because he told me, and he told him, and he told him. So, well, okay, that's fine. Say, but they could be wrong. True, they could be. Oh, but what if it was common knowledge that the Prophet said something? Say, well, sure. If it's common knowledge, it's mutawatir. It's like China, you know, like they couldn't have all been lying about that. So, okay, so he puts this topic in as a discussion in Usul Hadith, thereby opening a can of worms, ain't even the word actually, opening Pandora's box to a calamity that would come later on. So what happened from here, some scholars started to say, we've found Mutawatir Hadith. So you're like, what on earth are you on about? So they've started to say, well, so you have some people, like, so for example, one of the revolutionaries of Usul Hadith, Ibn Salah, to be fair to him, he writes in his Muqaddimah that actually Mutawatir Hadith is very unlikely to ever exist in Hadith. He says it's very unlikely. He's quite dismissive of it. But Ibn Hajar, by his time, he says, what are you talking about? Mutawatir, okay, how many people, you know, common knowledge, like if I asked you, how many people do you need to tell you to believe in something? So these people had this discussion in the past, and they wrote 40 people, and then somebody said 20 people, and somebody said 12, and somebody said 10, somebody said 5, somebody said 4. So they started writing these down in the books. Oh, this is, for it to be common knowledge, at least this many people must say. So Ibn Hajar is like he caused havoc in our tradition by actually pushing this thing of, actually, of course, a hadith can be mutawatir. How can it be mutawatir? 10 people say it's fine, alhamdulillah, it's impossible to now be a lie. And you think, whoa, hold your horses, mate. Why is that impossible for 10 people to get it wrong? So this whole discussion of mutawatir is nonsensical. This is why I asked these people, show me in the early scholars anybody who ever spoke of it. Imam Malik, Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Abu Dawood, these great scholars, Nisa'i, Ibn Majah, and in their times, you've got who? Ibn Hibban, who has his great hadith book, Ibn Hibban does. He's one of the major scholars of that era of hadith collection. What does he actually say? He says there is no such thing as mutawatir hadith. All hadith is isolated narrations. That means one person heard it from the Prophet, from him usually just one person, maybe two people, and that's how it works. Even if you get multiple one people, but it is still just an isolated narration. So he said that. You had Abu Bakr al-Hazmi endorsing his statement. You had Ibn Abi Dam endorsing his statement. These were all scholars saying, look, there is no such thing as mutawatir. Even Imam Shatibi saying that, look, this is a fruitless discussion. It really didn't belong in usul hadith at all. So today, what happened is the scholars, anything they wanted to push, they just started to claim the hadith is mutawatir. Okay, like, oh yeah, this is mutawatir. Why? Because I found a few different chains of it. Oh yeah. Now you can't deny it's haram to deny. It's kufr to deny. So, look, to understand all of this, just pause the discussion for a moment. Pause the discussion for a moment and just understand one simple thing. How many people does it take for you to hear to think that something is true? How many people? Like, you just think about that. Like, if I told you you're about to receive some news, how many people must tell you for you to believe it's true? If it was simply people telling, not evidence, not like here's video footage, here's... How many people must it take? You think about it. If 5 people told you something, do you believe that must certainly categorically now be true? There is no way on earth that can be anything other than because 5 people have told me. What if 20 people told you? Must it categorically now be true? Can it still not be wrong? Now, if you just think about this, the whole discussion opens up in front of you. In all honesty, you wouldn't accept even 20 people as certainty. Like, you'll accept it as overwhelmingly sure, that's convincing. It's convincing. It's not certainty. Like the way you don't need convincing that China exists. You're not like, you know what? Yeah, I'm convinced it. You know, no, that's like, to you, it's as plain as day that China does exist, that these countries do exist. Because that is absolute common knowledge. So you just think about this discussion on tawatur. What would it take? What number would it take for you as an individual to believe that something can't even have 1%? Can't even have 1% doubt. And the truth is, that is a discussion in and of itself, that can you even have certain knowledge, but perceptibly certain, what would it take? And I would say that I wouldn't accept even if 20 people told. I think that would be good. I'd be like, oh wow, I'm definitely, wow, I'm being convinced here because there's a lot of people said it, but I want some evidence. I want to check something out for myself. I don't want to just, 20 people said it, it doesn't mean it. It's impossible for it to be an error. So I hope that sheds some light. And what's happened is, unfortunately, sectarianism has entered the game, and scholars have hijacked this discussion, and anything they want to push, they just call it mutawatir. It's like, oh, mutawatir. It's like, no, it isn't. This is not mutawatir, mate. And then they took it a step further and said, because we're calling it mutawatir, it doesn't even matter. It does not even matter if all those chains were weak. This is what Ibn Hajar writes. Ibn Hajar says, even if all the chains are totally weak. Some of them say they don't even need to be Muslim. They don't even need to be this. And then you say, well, okay, if all that be true, how come you don't accept the mutawatir of the Shia? Because they don't need to even, because they're Shia, at least they're Muslim. Now, you yourself said the chains could be weak. You just said so many people have to say. Why don't you accept the mutawatir narrations of the Shia? So you don't, kafir. So look, so you contradict yourself. So people are using this as a tool for manipulation, right? So if you hear this thing, people say if you go against Mutawatir, you're not a Muslim anymore. That stuff is nonsense. This kind of emotional blackmail is so outdated, and it's actually false as far as the evidence is concerned. So guys, I just thought I wanted to share that.